rules. This is our night. This is
our show.
On this night, we rise.
This is the bleeding edge of science, technology, and ethics. This is
Pollution, unwilling to submit.
We learn all that is learnable.
Tonight, power shifts. Tonight, we raise our instruments of anarchy.
Peaceful coexistence, encryption, software, secure devices, and our minds.
Tonight, we are unbound by law.
It's time for Sovryn Tech. And now your host, the golden stallion of the tech world, the rated R radio star, Brian Sovryn.
Just when you thought it was safe to open up that old podcast app, perhaps just when you thought it was safe to turn on that old radio. Woo! The Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, the man that some call the most interesting anarchist in the world today, is here for you to give you some more Sovryn Tech, baby. And oh, we're coming from the Silicon Mill Yard in New Hampshire, and that ain't the only thing coming from the Silicon Mill Yard. Oh, have I got a hell of a thing to open up with, and why waste time? Let's just get into it. Let's get into the random access, and I'll tell you, give you a little hint real quick. I will be changing the name of the random access here in the near future. I got a great tip, a great idea from a Sovryn Tech listener that I just love, but I won't spoil the surprise because episode 200, it's coming. But oh man, yesterday, of course I am recording this on October 22nd, 2016. Yesterday was Friday, October 21st, and the world, seemingly the world anyway, at least a lot of North America and Europe was, perhaps struck in horror. They were, what is going on? Oh my God, I can't get on Spotify. I can't get on Netflix. So what happened is there was a massive, to the tune of tens of millions perhaps, of devices, or IP addresses, I should say, engaged in a DDoS attack on, some of it was AWS, Amazon's little AWS, which understand AWS powers 80% of the internet, as well as a DNS host known as Dyn, which is actually based out of, again, the Silicon Mill Yard in Manchester, New Hampshire. Now, I'll admit, I knew about Dyn. I've driven past, it's in one of these older factory buildings, which are relatively commonplace in Manchester. Of course, I live in New Hampshire, in case you're a new listener and you don't know that. I've driven by Manchester a million times, or driven by the Dyn building a million times to see that big black and yellow circle and all this. I had no idea. Because this is a company that started in 2001, I had no idea just how much they've grown and how really seemingly important they are to, honestly, online commerce and online interactions, to the web itself. And, I mean, they even do a little bit of email, too, which, again, the internet is a multitude of things. It's not just the web. It's also email. It's also IRC, blah, blah, blah. Anyway. So, but wow, I think at 7:00 was the first one. There was 3 waves of this attack, and I don't know of any more so far. I looked into it a little bit this morning to see what was up, but there was one at 7, there's one at 9, and then I think there was another one maybe 5 or something like it, 5:00 at night. What kind of shocked me, okay, was I see a bunch of people say, oh, my Netflix is down, and I'm like, it's a Friday, 7 a.m. or 9 a.m.? who the hell's watching Netflix at those times? I was a little blown away by that. But I guess, good for you if you have that kind of time and can do it. I was sort of surprised. But yeah, just a ton. Twitter apparently was down for quite a few people. Now, I didn't notice a stitch of this. Like, I don't know if I just happened to be on the times where everything was up and fine and dandy, or just because I don't rely on online services so much. I use a lot of offline software. Really, I think every piece of software, you shouldn't have to caveat the word software with offline, but that's just my own preference. But anyway, this DDoS attack, was going down, and it was huge. Like I said, tens of millions of IP addresses. Now, there's a lot of speculation around this. In fact, I was a little hesitant to even talk about it on various social media, and I'm still a little hesitant to even talk about it with any kind of certainty or confidence in this episode. And this isn't our main story either. We've got other shit to get to. Okay, but I do want to break into it, because as far as the evidence that we have right now, okay, as to how this all happened, I'll get into the possible actors, the people that could have been behind this in a second. But as far as, how are there tens of millions of IP addresses engaging in this DDoS attack? Is the average person's computer somehow suddenly, part of this giant botnet that's doing the DDoS, right? Some malicious actor, some bad actor kind of takes over all these computers and uses your computer to do a DDoS attack. Frankly, considering the amount of IP addresses, here's the irony, is that it seems impossible for it to be that many people's computers, to have done that. So what's doing this? It's not people's computers. It's largely, here's the juice. Internet of Things, or as I always call them, Internet of Things to be hacked. And how prescient my phraseology is on that. Because it's exactly what happened, is that with all of these interconnected devices, you have the ultimate botnet to just take over, and especially Internet of Things, because as we've talked about over and over and over and over and over again on Sovryn Tech, nobody's securing this shit down. There aren't any real standards. It's a giant clusterfuck of completely unnecessary devices that have been used to create this, depending how you look at it, issue, okay, to create this DDoS attack. This is nuts. In fact, I dare say, getting into perhaps who did this. All right, so some people, I know Bruce Schneier and some others are claiming, it looks like all of this really started in China. Now, I'm not going to claim that the Chinese government or whoever has anything to do with this. In fact, really, nobody fucking knows. Nobody has a goddamn clue who's doing this. Okay, they might have a little bit of a clue, and I could give you a theory, all right, but, some people are saying it's China. Now, what's interesting is what country makes a shit ton of IoT devices? China? And you almost wonder if IoT isn't some kind of Trojan horse. It is in many ways, but to this level, a Trojan horse to literally shut down the internet around the world. Like that, that's a theory that some people are banting about, and I don't blame them. This is a big fucking problem. And I know people are like, well, what do you do about IoT? About these IoT devices, can we update them? Well, some of them don't get updates anymore. In fact, thank you, Google. You've killed a lot of IoT devices that are out there, and you've no longer, you're not allowing for any service updates or anything of the sort, and you're not open sourcing this shit that's been canned. So you have a double problem here. Okay. It's a double Dutch bust, right? You have the fact that, a lot of these companies have already come and gone, and they no longer either AlphaGoog or someone's bought them out and they canceled their product, right? Or whatever. But, you can't get updates for it anymore. And when they end of life these things, they don't open source it to where someone could independently come up with updates. This is going to be a problem, just across the board, because since IoT is bullshit, of course, the companies that start creating IoT devices are either, again, they're going to get bought out and canceled, or they're just going to shut down. They're just going to shutter their doors. So, I mean, that's a huge, right there. Forget about the technical aspects of it. Just from a market perspective, IoT is a danger to commerce, frankly, and to online interaction. I mean, that's just the facts. And here's the proof. Here's the real proof of that. Now, what's the solution? Okay, again, just updating the things. And boy, you want to talk about a fucking pain in the ass to update a lot of these things. What's the solution? Well, the solution is don't fucking use it because they're goddamn meaningless. And they're, well, not just meaningless, they're useless. Like I've said so many times on the show, really, you can't pull down your own fucking shade on your fucking window. Are you kidding? You need an IoT device for that? Or how about the dogs that have died because the feeders, the internet connected automatic dog feeders, cancel when all you really need is a timer and a goddamn switch on the thing. IoT is such a terrible idea and you're seeing it. Now, that's not the only terrible idea here. We'll get into, what perhaps the real answer is to all of this. But bottom line is, don't buy into this IoT. And you could say, well, it's early stages. No, it's a flawed model. I just told you why. It's a flawed fucking model from the get-go. Okay? Because what these devices do and the lack of importance that a lot of companies are going to hold on to because they're just going to drop and cancel and who gives a shit, right? Or whatever. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible idea right out of the gate. All right. Now you can say, well, what if I just buy Google's products? Well, go ahead. But let's be clear here. And we talked about this. I had that special that I released on the Sovryn Tech main feed that everybody can listen to. It was originally Patreon only, but I made it available to everyone. Okay. Where we talked about the fact that Google seems to be making it very clear that if you want Google's IoT, if you want Google's ecosystem to work, you absolutely have to get rid of your privacy. You will not have it. Oh, in fact, hell, I could side note into that because it was just found out that or you might have had to go through a new process of updating your privacy settings or your terms of service with Google. And apparently they have significantly changed their terms of service, their EULA and all that, to where it says that, oh yeah, where Google said, we are going to integrate your, all of your Google data with your DoubleClick data, which is their ad service and all this, which they promised they wouldn't do years ago. Now, we're doing it. We're doing it. Yeah, you have to opt in, but you don't really realize, I think, for a lot of people that have gone through the process of, accepting the new terms of service, they don't realize that they're opting in. Okay, but they are because the language isn't clear. And of course, Google doesn't want it to be clear. Yeah, so much for Google giving a shit about your privacy. But anyway, you could go with Google Home and all this stuff, right? Fine. Okay. You could go with the big companies. Fine. I get that. You're probably going to get updates forever. In fact, in the present world we live in, yes, if you were so goddamn hot about having your window shades close automatically or whatever other, or, your smart fucking toaster, which, yeah, or your smart coffee machine, which why you can't appreciate the morning ritual of making coffee or tea or whatever, I don't know. There's a beauty to that. It doesn't necessarily have to be automated all the time. Can't wait till that shit fails and somebody burns their goddamn foot or slips on their ass. But I mean, I don't want that to happen, but it's going to happen. Yeah, you could go with the big companies, okay, that are going to release all this stuff, and then you'll probably solve that problem of, am I going to get patches? Am I going to get updates? Is this going to be, supported for a long period of time? Yeah, maybe. But even then, well, we're starting to see, particularly with, like, say, Google's new ecosystem, hardware ecosystem that they, announced at that 10.4 event earlier this month. Like with the Pixels, they've said that they will guarantee updates for 2 years on the Pixels. Now we're talking about, the Pixel phones. This is their new ones, the Pixel and the Pixel XL. These are $600 to $1,000 devices that they're only guaranteeing support for 2 years, which, I mean, that's really code word for you need to update your fucking, you need to buy a new device in 2 years, right? So I'm sure that's going to be the same with IoT, is that there'll just be a point where they will stop, putting out updates. Maybe not every company would be that way, but at least with Google, we see hints of that's exactly how they're going to do business. Okay. So IoT, I mean, this is just like I could just run around and dance proving that IoT is bullshit and that it's a gigantic security problem. It is the Internet of Things to be hacked, and it got hacked. And it took down the fucking internet. Woo! Now, we mentioned China. There are other people who are claiming to have been, to be behind this. One of them is that WikiLeaks is apparently, and as much as I'd like WikiLeaks, I thought this was a little, I don't know how to put this. I mean, I don't want to say grandiose, but I thought this was a little crazy. So WikiLeaks on their own Twitter have claimed that this entire attack was a response to Julian Assange's internet getting cut off by the Ecuadorian government due to pressure, of course, of the U.S. government, and due to the election, blah, 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 which we don't talk about the election on this show. Because who gives a shit? And no matter who gets in, we lose, right? Everybody loses. It really doesn't matter who gets in. No one is not better than the other. They all suck ass. Okay. So, to say that it was WikiLeaks, it was some kind of, response to Julian Assange. I mean, I don't know if I buy that. I really, that seems a little ludicrous. I mean, like why not claim the attack then? Like, that's what doesn't make sense. Like make a fucking announcement. Some people are saying, oh, it was anonymous in response to WikiLeaks and all that. Well, there's the argument that anonymous might not even exist anymore. Really? Like that it's something else. But I'm not getting into that. But, if it was anonymous, let's say, usually they announce this shit. Like they put out some kind of video and people pretty readily know when it quote unquote, when it's them. So I don't know if I buy that either. Now, what people are saying is that this seems to be part of a much longer game where where things are getting, the security of, the internet as an infrastructure and all that is constantly being tested. And again, the argument is that it's by some kind of state actor. Okay. But that, this is a test, right? Not of the emergency broadcasting system. Beep. This is a test of, cybersecurity as a whole for America and Europe, which is, again, I think another reason why a lot of people want to say it's something out of Asia, that actually initiated the DDoS, because that was the country that that was, the region of the world. I shouldn't say country. It's not a country. It is the region of the world that was largely unaffected, largely. Like I said, it's anybody's guess. I mean, honestly, if it were me, I would almost believe, because a lot of people are saying, oh, this is the first cyber war. This is the first, this is the shot across the bow, of the very first cyber war and all. And I'm like, no. I really don't think, that's what went down here. Some people want to say that this has similarly happened. Of course, it was a year ago, almost a year ago to the day, when a very similar, it was in September of 2015, when there was, the AWS server farm, I think it was in West Virginia, maybe, where, a whole bunch of, even like Skype was down, Netflix was down. I think even Gmail was affected, where, there was this giant internet outage. Again, it's interesting that it's kind of happening on a similar timeline. I'll give it that. But I don't think that one was necessarily a state actor either. Or if it is a state actor, I don't think, tell you what, if it were a state actor, honestly, I'd believe it was the NSA itself that did it. That was testing this whole thing out, to see, okay, how can we shut down the internet if need be? I don't believe it's Russia. I don't believe it's China, for a bunch of reasons, because, well, one of them being is that, they kind of rely on these services and, for their life's blood, to deal with a lot of companies in these countries. So that's not the only reason, but I'm just saying, I don't buy that it's that. I don't necessarily buy that it was WikiLeaks either. I get the sense it's someone or it's something that nobody else is really thinking about. And, if I was to believe it was a state actor, I would think it's the NSA itself. But again, nobody really has a clue. Nobody has really good evidence pointing in any direction. So it's all speculation. I am speculating. Let me make that clear again. I am speculating. Okay. So that's all right. I can say what I like. But anyway, man, I mean, the real solution here, obviously, is, I mean, it just goes to show this is a byproduct of centralization at the end of the day. This is what you get when you have one big bad internet, as we always call it on Sovryn Tech. If you had multiple internets, if you went peer-to-peer with a lot of things, wouldn't have been an issue because you couldn't affect so many different areas, from just attacking one little company, quote unquote, in Manchester, New Hampshire. And, that shocks me. I had no idea just how important Manchester, New Hampshire, my backyard, was to the internet. I mean, this is huge, how much went down. Again, it wasn't just Dine's, servers that were, their AWS was part of it too. But, and hey, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying it's very interesting, there's a weak point. And is this going to get solved? I mean, not really, because again, the main issue, you can harden your servers all you want. I mean, a DDoS, you can't really do much about a DDoS attack. Now, I mean, there's a lot of technologies that have come out, there's smart cache and all this different stuff to try and help you kind of mitigate the effects on, say, commerce and services and all that online. When these sorts of things happen. But you really, without fundamentally changing the way that the internet works, you cannot do much about trying to resolve DDoS attacks from happening. What allows the internet to function is what allows for, to do what it does is what allows for DDoS to be so effective. You just really can't do much about it. All right. The best thing you can do is to not have so many goddamn IP addresses. And how do you do that? Well, fucking put the kibosh on the whole Internet of Things. Right? I mean, that's the reality. And you can say that, well, people could, what if we just end up with, 12 billion people on the planet and they all have a computer or they all have a smartphone? Well, very different story because you have an interface and because, you're talking about more of a standard operating system and all that, all those things can get updated regularly and all those things can have entire security platforms built into them as they have had for decades that, would make this not so much of a problem. As to where Internet of Things, this is what happens when you lose the interface. This is, when you go to zero UI, right? I mean, because effectively, you really don't have much of an interface. Yeah, you could log into it through your router, maybe, or there's software or an app or something, but that's not really security because, again, that's an app that you're, more running off of another device. It's not direct to device. I mean, this is so wrong. And it just shows the importance of everything we've been talking about on Sovryn Tech for years on this show and why the going in those directions, going towards distributed and decentralized and peer-to-peer, is just so fucking key. It is so important to not have, this gigantic something I talked about many times and people think it's crazy when I say it, but now I don't think people are finding it as crazy, but I talk about having multiple internets. Great. If you have multiple internets, plural. Okay. This no longer really becomes an issue because say you could just jump around to different internets, or different webs perhaps. There's and peer-to-peer could make all of this happen. Mesh networks could make all of this happen. It could really mitigate, these actions from happening, these attacks from happening on such a mass scale. It just couldn't happen. And I really think that, well, a lot of people talk about, and this is the interesting thing for me, especially considering that it happened with Dine in particular. Granted, Dine has offices all over the world, in London, all over the place. They have servers, it's more than just Manchester, New Hampshire, but that is their base of operations. I mean, and there was a part of me that was like, oh, well, if New Hampshire ever seceded from the U.S., which is something that a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, are really pushing for and working towards, well, look at that. You know, I mean, some people say it's like, oh, well, you know, if New Hampshire ever seceded, if any state ever seceded from the U.S., oh, they would get cut off from everything. Well, actually, looks like if New Hampshire seceded, you know, if Dine kind of got shut off, and I'm not saying anybody should do this. I am not recommending any kind of action of that sort. Do not confuse this. Okay. Don't take me out of context. Then, I mean, honestly, like New Hampshire could actually cut off a huge chunk of North America from the rest of the world if there was, you know, trouble started or whatever. It was, anyway. And also, you know, something I've been pushing for a while is that I think that people that are interested in, say, independence for New Hampshire, not that I get involved in the political shit at all, okay, but if people are interested in that, one of the things New Hampshire is going to need is its own internet. Like, it really needs an intranet, you know, within just, you know, kind of the geographic area itself. Well, guess what? We've got Dine. It's built in right here. And obviously it can handle a lot. So I mean, well, just putting that out there. The other thing too, I just want to touch on this. Speaking of governments, okay, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, you know, this was, you know, again, that it was anonymous or those WikiLeaks and they were fucking with the government and everything. You didn't fuck with the government at all. Are you kidding me? Sippernet, Rippernet, they weren't down. The government already has, you know, that's the funny thing. There already are really multiple internets. It's just the average person doesn't have access to them. The government does. So, I mean, you know, Rippernet and Sippernet weren't down at all. I mean, you can just, it's so funny when you hear people talk like that, oh yeah, this is the people rising up and telling the government, fuck you. You didn't affect the government. The government uses a whole other system, frankly. You didn't do shit to the government. I mean, oh man. I mean, you can tell the lack of understanding of how our interconnected world works by how, you know, by the way that people react to this sort of thing. You know, the victory lap to be had here is over really just the fact that it proves IoT is a terrible fucking model. The entire industry shouldn't exist. That's the real victory lap. It's not the people rose up against the government. No, they didn't. In fact, I would argue, my best guess is that it was the U.S. government itself that enacted this. And it's just a guess. Anyway, boy, you know, I had a bunch of stories to get into. I was going to talk about the exploding Note 7s that you can't even bring onto a fucking airplane anymore. Ooh, because it's bad. These Note 7s, even after they get replaced, they're still blowing up. Oh, man. I was of half a mind I was like, you know what? I'm going to be needing a new phone soon. I think, you know, maybe I'm going to go with an iPhone this time around. Seriously. Because Android is just, in so many ways, it is just so fucked. But I already talked about that in that, I think the episode was called It'll Never Be Okay, Google, that I released last week. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that, you can listen to that. But boy, I'm of half a mind to, it's just so, all of it's just so fucking nuts. Anyway, why don't I get into, I do have a lead story that I want to get into, and I think it's an important subject to break down. We don't really, you know, the rest of the shit, honestly, it could wait. So, my main story this week was actually, I'm kind of, this is sort of, first choice because this got sent to me, by a great listener, but I think it fits in better here than it will in the next segment, because in the next segment, I want to get into a topic that I venture you may have never heard of before, or an idea that you may have never heard before, but that's been around for a long while. More of a science story. I mean, definitely lots of tech involved, but yeah, I want to get into that. But why don't we break into our lead story here? Because this is another doozy. You know, when you talk about perhaps failed product categories, well, let's touch on this one. And this is from Ars Technica. By let's see, Jonathan Gitlin. Don't plan on using your autonomous Tesla to earn money with Uber or Lyft. What the hell does that all mean? Well, let's read on with the story, because this is just going to prove more of what we've talked about on Sovryn Tech. Holy shit. Here we go. On Thursday night, that was this past week, Tesla announced the new Model X and Model S electric vehicles will now come with the necessary hardware to allow them to drive completely autonomously at a future point in time. But buried in the notes about this new functionality, there was also a warning to future Tesla owners. Don't expect to be able to use your EV driving for Uber, Lyft, or any other ride-sharing service that isn't owned by Tesla. On Tesla's website, the section that describes the new, quote, full self-driving capability, end quote, a $3,000 option at the time of purchase, $4,000 after the fact, states, quote, please note also that using a self-driving Tesla for car sharing and ride-hailing for friends and family is fine, but doing so for revenue purposes will only be permissible on the Tesla network, details of which will be released next year. End quote. In Elon Musk's Master Plan Part 2, the company's CEO included plans for a Tesla ride-sharing network, which we know will be called the Tesla Network. However, no other information about this program has escaped into the wild yet. While this is the first instance we can think of where a car company has preemptively banned its customers from using their vehicles for a specific use, post-sale conditions imposed by car companies are not entirely unheard of. And that's key. Post-sale conditions. All right, but let's read on. Ferrari, for example, has been known to insist that customers buying its most expensive cars, like the Enzo or LaFerrari, promise not to resell them before a certain point. And the Italian sports car maker also famously disliked the way one of its high-profile customers had his car wrapped. We should also note that this language does not appear to prohibit owners of the latest Model X and Model S EVs from electric vehicle, from working as drivers for ride-sharing companies as long as they're controlling the EV themselves. However, sending one's Tesla out to work for Uber while sitting in the comfort of your home will apparently not be tolerated. Quite how Tesla plans to detect and enforce this ban is unclear at this time, although it's well known that the company will look into the data sent back to its servers if it feels the need. Ooh, boy. A lot to unpack from this, because so how will they, be able to enforce this? Well, it's very simple. Everybody already knows this. We've already talked about all this. In fact, there was a great episode on Patreon. If you're not a Sovryn Tech patron yet, go to patreon.com/SovrynTech, or you can go to SovrynTech.com. That'll actually now take you right to the Patreon page, because I'm getting such a great response from Patreon, the Patreon content, that it's like, well, there's home. But anyway, there was an episode that I did with Brett Venat, who was on last week's Sovryn Tech, which that was thank you all for the kind words. It was a great episode. I enjoyed doing it. We'll have Brett on again. And also we had Andrew from Puke and the Gang, who is an absolute car enthusiast, far more knowledgeable about cars than I am. And we did a three-way episode where we talked about Tesla and all of the problems with their model and, their business model and the models themselves, the S and the X and the 3 and all that. So if you want to hear about that, you can become a patron and you can find that episode. But in that, we talked about how, effectively, Tesla has a God mode where they know everything. They know every mile you've driven. And part of the reason that they say they do this is so that they can offer that lifetime repair or that free repair service where they will come to you and fix your Tesla if something goes wrong. And I know you're like, wow, what a great service. Well, that comes at a cost. And I don't just mean, on the bottom line or on the price tag of your new Tesla. Okay. It comes at the cost of, they know every second where you are, what you're doing, how fast you're driving. They know everything that you're doing in that car. Everything. Shy of them having a camera in there, which who knows? So that's very easy to enforce. They will know if you are driving in patterns that are like, looks like this person's starting their own rideshare service, right? And of course, how do they enforce this? Well, we also know that, I shouldn't say we know, but it's highly likely that Tesla can just shut off your car. And that's exactly what they do. Talk about horrendous post-sale conditions for a car. I can't think of any worse. You know everything I'm doing with my car, and you can turn off my car at any given fucking time. Everybody's okay with this? In fact, I'm shocked. I shared this story a bit on various social media, and some people were defending, saying, oh, well, this is what I signed up for. Oh, all right. I guess I just come from a different goddamn time, because I am boggled that people are like, yeah, no, this is totally okay. I mean, and this, this raises a whole bunch of points because, privacy stuff aside, like not that you can ever really put that aside, right? Because it's a quintessential human liberty, so you shouldn't put it aside. But I was thinking about it. I was like, oh man, not that I do not want a driverless car. I have no interest in a driverless car. And there's the automatic problem with driverless cars that really, for them to really work, every car has to be driverless. Okay, for that to actually do what it wants to do. Kind of like earlier, we were talking about Google with their 10.4 event, where how does the Google Home really work? Well, it only works the way they're selling it, by having everybody be on board with having a Google Home and having all of Google's, hardware products and all this stuff. Everybody has to be on with it, or it can't deliver what it's doing. And the same is true for Tesla, for driverless cars, is that really, for them to genuinely work, everybody is going to have to own one. You cannot have, a car with a steering wheel that you can take control of. Okay. I know that time's coming down the line. It's not here yet, but I mean, that's what, honest engineers are saying, about how this technology will happen. And I'm inclined to agree with them. So, I mean, that's a problem right out of the gate. But what would be interesting is that really, the average person, or not the average, but a person with enough means could really start with no overhead costs other than buying a bunch of Teslas, or, some whatever driverless car, could really start their own. I mean, they could start their own Uber. They could start their own, their own Lyft, or they could start their own Arcade City. Well, if the app ever came out, still not out. Update. Still nothing. Still no drive, ride sharing capabilities. Woo. Anyway, side note. But somebody could start their own little taxi empire with no employees. You don't need any drivers. You don't need any. I mean, it would all work. I mean, you could even have on the Tesla, you have that big fucking, OLED screen or whatever in the center console. Just have a little, have a QR code come up, and you could even pay with Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. I mean, like, all kinds of very interesting things could get done. That would be really wild. I mean, I could see some serious entrepreneurship happening here with, your little army of driverless cars. But no. I think Tesla knows that, people are going to think about doing that. And you could probably make some pretty good change out of the fact. But they're not going to let it happen. They want everything to be done through the Tesla network. Now they say, oh, well, if you want it, your friends and family can use it, but not anybody else, blah, blah, blah. And like we said, they're going to be able to track every little goddamn thing you do. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a cutoff point where they're going to say, okay, you're not just letting your friends and family use this. And also they'd probably be able to know when, well, I mean, you could do it through an app on a smartphone. It wouldn't even have to be in the car, like have the QR code in the car. You could just do it, pay through the smartphone itself, through an app itself. But eventually, I think they'd figure out, what's really going on here. But this speaks to such a much larger problem. And it's interesting that, not that I give a shit about laws, I'm an anarchist, okay? But a lot of the property laws that have been created over the past 100 years, well, up until, say, recently, was always about two things. One, it was about consumer protection, and the other, it was about, like, property protection, keeping it under your control. Okay, it was designed to get you away from, effectively, the feudal lord system. Like, so really, it's been for 200 years that property law was getting massaged and changed to where you were in control of what you owned, and you didn't have to, pay dividends or fealty to some asshat, in Nevada or wherever. That has changed. That we have come full circle. Like the lack of control that you really have over the property that you buy is astounding. And the fact that nobody seems to care. is also astounding. And the fact that nobody seems to realize you are really, so much of this interconnectedness, you are selling this shit. It's never really yours. Yeah, and I don't know what happened, because I remember in the 90s, people flipped out, when it was like, or at least, people with some degree of understanding and that actually knew what they were doing with a computer were pissed. I was too, that you never really owned Windows. That's part of the reason Linux kind of took off, is because there's a community that knew that that's not okay. You're licensed to use it, but you never really own it, even though you lay down $150, $200 for it, right? In whatever way you end up paying for it. So, is it just that people really don't, I don't get it. I don't get it, because I keep hearing, anarchists get all hot and bothered about, oh, this is communism. Oh, it's terrible. I want my property. It's mine. It's mine. When you people are getting excited over shit that ain't yours. If I can't do whatever the fuck I want with a car after I buy it, it's not mine. It's not. And I know some people want to say, well, Tesla, this is really just kind of cover your ass. Put it in the fucking, put it in the terms of service. Put it in the EULA for the fucking car that says, we're not held accountable if you use this with anything other than the Tesla network. Which, boy, the Tesla network, like, if that's not the grand plan in the first place, the master plan, as Elon Slapnuts Musk says. There's easy ways to do it. You don't have to spy on everybody. Just put it in the legalese saying we're not responsible if such and such happens. Okay, good. There you go. You don't have to turn off my car. You don't have to do anything. It's just you won't be held responsible in court if somebody dies, because of my little entrepreneurial venture with running, a little EV fleet, a driverless EV fleet. This is crazy. And I call bullshit on all of you fucking propertarians. Because you're almost, seemingly, it almost feels like you're the communists, because you're just handing over all of your shit to the control, to centralized control of somebody else. You don't really own anything. Woo! Time for a little live read, folks. I want to tell you about one of my, I'm complaining about businesses right and left here, but here's one I will never complain about. Roberts and Roberts Brokerage, okay? And here's something that, this is legit. Talk about having control. There's no more control than something that doesn't connect to the internet, stores wealth, and you can hold in your own goddamn hands. And that is gold, silver, platinum, palladium, all the coins, the bars, whatever, however you want to get it. Okay, that you can get from Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. You want to get your hands on this, okay? You want to do that, what I call that classic cold storage, right? Where it doesn't get any colder than gold, baby. All right, you want to go to Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. This is one of the best businesses in the world. They are a friend of the show. I cannot appreciate them enough for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. They believe in what we're talking about here and what we're doing here. It's a real honor. So I want you to go to gold.zog.ninja. And let me tell you, these guys are so on board, you can buy gold and silver from them with Bitcoin. That's right. They are a Bitcoin preferred business. They know that that's money that's as real as the wealth that gold and all the rest stores. It's so great. You are dealing with an absolutely ethical business and just a great idea. Decentralize your wealth. Get your hands onto the gold and silver. Gold.zog.ninja. Now, why don't we get back to some of that Sovryn?
Pixel, I'm being chased by assassin bots. I need an exit. Pixel!
Brian Sovryn, come with me if you want to leave.
Who are you?
I'm Adelaide. I'll tell you more later. Get in the vehicle.
Get in a car with a scantily clad and beautiful woman? Guess it's been my first choice before. Let's go.
First choice.
It is time for First Choice, where I cover the stories that get sent in to me through the various channels. Of course, I kind of already did First Choice, but I got a great story here to talk about. And, of course, if you want all the channels available, it's pretty much down to Twitter, which, whoo, that company's in trouble. But nothing new to Sovryn Tech listeners. We've been predicting that for a good long while now. Okay, but there's Twitter, there's the email, and, of course, if you're a Sovryn Tech patron on Patreon, there's all the ways available through Patreon to get in touch with me. But before I get into this great story, look, folks, I'm just saying that is it really yours if you don't control it? I mean, you could say what the varying degrees of controls are, but I mean, I really think this is a genuine problem. And I just find it so ironic that all these people are I mean, you are handing over, you really don't own it. You are handing over control of something. It's like you're renting. Everything's renting. And it's so funny because, when you get into, like, say, anarcho-capitalists, which I know I have a lot of listeners that aren't even anarchists, and so you'll pardon me this moment. When you talk about anarcho-capitalists, like, one of the arguments that a lot of, say, anarcho-syndicalists or, red and blacks, whatever, okay, whatever hyphenated term they want to run with, that they put against you is that you guys are, that anarcho-capitalists are effectively going to, everything's going to be rented. Like, everything's going to be for rent. You're never actually going to be able to really own anything. And honestly, when you start handing over everything, to these companies and all this, I mean, it's kind of ending up that way. I mean, and I know there's some people that are like, well, I don't mind if I never own a car. But again, this is so, I'll just, that's what they say is like, well, I'll just use, an automated Uber or whatever. But this is the thing, is that we lose an option when we go in that direction, when you vote with your dollars to go in the direction of driverless, because it doesn't work unless everybody's on board with that. So, I mean, that's a concern. I'm not saying that Tesla's doing anything unethical in the way that they're setting things up, but I am saying that really you're losing control. And I don't know, I guess as a consumer, I just thought that I was supposed to have control of what I buy. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong about that. You can send me an email if you think I'm wrong about that. I guess I'm just old fashioned into thinking that when I buy a car that I can do whatever the fuck I want with it. I can go drive it in the backyard. I could go drive around the barn. I could go in a demolition derby. I could do whatever. Maybe I could start my own little, independent rideshare service or something, without having to answer, because what's the fees for Tesla Network? Fuck that. I want to run my own. Will the market have some other company come out that will allow for it to do differently? Oh, I imagine someone would, like George Hotz with his company, that you'd be able to create your own little rideshare service, right? By buying a bunch of, say, his upgraded cars, with his model. I'm sure that's going to be possible for a little while, but then the regulators, and Tesla has a gigantic lobbying group. Okay. Tesla will they'll effectively buy the government into creating a law that says, no, this is not allowed, which is in some ways is already happening. When you talk about in Austin, how Uber and Lyft aren't allowed, right? I mean, and the other thing too, and with so much of this shit, it always comes down to the fucking narrative. It always comes down to the narrative. And this is my number one problem with, with Slapnuts Musk. Elon Musk. Okay. Is he gets held up as like this great innovator and hero, like a libertarian hero, like he cares about freedoms and all this stuff. I don't feel very free when I'm constantly being monitored by the company itself, not by the U.S. government. Or when, when I'm not allowed to do what I want to with the car. Now, I don't have to buy his cars. Sure, absolutely. You're right. I don't have to buy his cars. But again, at some point, I know, based upon some very honest engineers' observations, that the time will come where I can't have a steering wheel in my car. That's a problem. And he is part of that problem. Tesla is part of that problem. But go ahead. Hand over all the control to your shit. I'm an anarchist. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Anyway, oh, God. And I know, I'm pretty sure I have a lot of listeners that they own Teslas. Okay. And I appreciate you sticking with me and appreciating, my perspective. I hope, as most human beings should, you can handle opposing opinions. I hope. Okay. I can handle it. I have the conversations, and I'm usually actually a pretty nice guy about it. But, when it's talking about, on Sovryn Tech, I'm talking about what I want, talking about my desires, and this goes against them. straight up. Anyway, let's have some fun. Because I really, really like this story. I think this is interesting. And this story is coming from the website, Good. That's all it's called. It's Good. Good.is. And, I looked into it to make sure that a lot of what the story was claiming, is it corroborated elsewhere, perhaps on some somewhat more well-known websites and whatever. And it was. But this was kind of the best write-up that I could find on the whole matter. And I thought it was really interesting. But I want to talk about this because I think it has some interesting implications and some interesting ideas. Like I said, this is going to be more of a science story. And it's why one man devoted his life to draining the Mediterranean Sea by Kate Ryan. Now, I know instantly you're like, what the fuck? No, this is a terrible idea. Don't do it. But let's talk about it because this is kind of interesting. Quote, it may sound like something from a sci-fi movie, but one man crafted a very real plan to drain the Mediterranean Sea, effectively merging Europe and Africa into one supercontinent. As far-fetched as this idea may sound, Hermann Sorgel, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, dedicated his life to it. In 1929, while most of Europe was still reeling from World War I, Sorgel, a German architect, wrote a book detailing his idea for the massive project called the Panropa Project, lowering the Mediterranean, irrigating the Sahara. 3 years later, when that didn't seem to catch on, Sorgel repackaged the idea in another book called Atlantropa. Atlantropa? Okay, let's go with that. Probably in reference to Atlanta or Atlantis, right? Which is still the work he's best remembered for today. In Atlantropa, Sorgel describes closing off the Strait of Gibraltar and setting up two other enormous dams that would make modern China's Three Gorges Dam look puny in comparison. By lowering sea levels to make room for farmland and gathering hydroelectricity from the dams, Sorgel claimed the project would provide jobs and boost prosperity within the Euro-African region for decades. Sorgel's plan may sound crazy, but his aim was far from it. According to Atlas Obscura, he saw Atlantropa as boy, that's such a weird name, as a solution for the deep depression Europe found itself struggling to crawl out of following the First World War. Requiring intercontinental cooperation and millions of workers, Sorgel, who is a diehard pacifist, very important to keep in mind, reading on, saw the project as an opportunity to rebuild frayed relations amidst unemployment, poverty, and the building tensions that plagued European nations. You could argue that creative solutions such as Sorgel's were more desperately optimistic than outrageous. Despite support from fellow Germans, Atlantropa never got past the daydreaming stage. By the time the Nazis took over Germany, they weren't interested in dams or community building. They were interested in expanding territory the old-fashioned way by conquering other countries and absorbing them into their fold. It didn't help either that the rise of nuclear power quickly overshadowed hydroelectricity's capabilities. Alas, Atlantropa lives on in the fictional works of Philip K. Dick and Gene Roddenberry. But if Star Trek's ability to influence scientific innovation is any indication, fiction has a lot more power than we'd like to think. Who knows? Maybe the next off-the-wall idea will be the one to save us all. Now, it's true, breaking into this, and there's some history we need to cover here, really. It's very true that, yes, and there's a Philip K. Dick story that talks about raising the draining the Mediterranean. There was that episode in season 4 of The Next Generation where Picard goes, of Star Trek The Next Generation, where Picard goes, back home to France, and lives with his brother Rene for a while. And in that episode, Picard gets offered to, not go back to Starfleet because he's on shore leave at the time, and instead become, a lead scientist or whatever at, it's called Project Atlantis or something, if I remember correctly. And the idea is that, they would be, draining the Mediterranean or, raising up some of the land, however they ended up wanting to do it. I mean, kind of terraforming the earth itself in a way, which is interesting. And some people would say is, right out of the gate, a crazy idea. Now, the initial concerns, I think, that come up with an idea like this, and yes, it's also true, the Nazis were very interested in this idea, and not for the pacifist reasons, that Sorgel was interested in doing it. but, I think immediately what people are going to say is, oh, fuck, you're messing with the ecology. You're messing with the ecosystem there. You're going to screw with biodiversity and all that. Some of which are very real concerns that I agree with. Biodiversity is positively quintessential, okay, in my opinion, to the continuation of life on any planet, particularly the Earth. So, I get that. I understand what you're saying. But here's where people, I think, start to, lose focus, and where when you don't take a multidisciplinary approach to something, you miss of some very important facts. Much like when we've talked about on Sovryn Tech in the past, in fact, years ago, we talked about there was a scientist that wanted to bring back, actually there's a company now that's looking to bring back the woolly mammoth, or if anything, create cold hardy elephants, like, kind of create these hybrid mammoth and elephants. But, some people just wanted to bring back the woolly mammoth itself. Now, you could say, wow, you're reintroducing that animal into the present day. There's going to be real problems here because, what's its predator? How does it fit into the grand scheme of life on Earth? Blah, 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 blah. Well, much like that, the solution is the same, perhaps, with the Mediterranean. Okay. And what I mean by that is that most people don't understand that really the woolly mammoth has only been extinct for 6,000 years. It hasn't been long at all. And frankly, the only reason it went extinct wasn't because there was some, predator that might not exist anymore. In fact, the predator that theoretically wiped it out is the top predator in the world right now, that being humans. Okay. So, reintroducing the woolly mammoth isn't really a problem because it really hasn't been that long. Like, there hasn't been that much time for adaptation, for microevolution to take place. Right. So it wouldn't be that far of a stretch. It wouldn't be that big of a problem to reintroduce it. And also, what wiped it out? It was us. So, not that I'm saying there needs to be any guilt in the matter. Humans are hungry. Okay. But I'm just saying that it's not that far of a stretch to reintroduce the woolly mammoth. Now, I would argue with you, and you can disagree, but I would argue that it's not that far of a stretch to drain a good chunk of the Mediterranean, because historically, there are, and this is well known, well documented, and there, not just documented, the evidence exists in museums. There are literally hundreds of cities in the Mediterranean itself, because the water, the waters has, they've gone up, they've risen, the water table's risen, right? Or the water level. So it's not that much of a stretch. It's not like you're saying, oh, what are you going to wipe out? What kind of sea life is going to get destroyed and all that? Not much, because clearly if there's human cities, that means within just the past few, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years or so, there were humans living on that very land in the past. So you're not really introducing a new problem. You're just kind of, bringing it back to a point where it was. And please, we could get into, it's like, oh, well, why are these cities underwater now? Climate change? Did humans cause? Stop that fucking argument. That's all meaningless to even get into. Okay. The point is that on huge chunks of what now make the Mediterranean Sea, humans once lived on dry land. So you're not really terraforming, really. You're not really changing anything. You're more just bringing it back in many ways to the way that it was not long ago. So I think there's an interesting case to be made for this, for doing this sort of thing. And I agree. Granted, I don't want governments involved, of course, but like a lot of Sorgel's conclusions in Atlantropa are right on. Like, I think you could irrigate a good chunk of the Sahara. And I don't think that's a problem either, because we also know that there were times where good chunks of the Sahara were rather lush. They were green. Okay. So nothing's, and it's only been a few thousand years. That's not enough time really in the grand scheme for, new ecosystems can take place, but not for where you're going to really, because the concern is that you're going to unbalance, the biodiversity of the Earth. To unbalance it, when you're talking about in the order of thousands of years and, the Earth being, billions of years old, I don't think it's that, it's a blip, all right? It's a blip on the galactic calendar that we would be affecting in any way, if it would even, affect it that much. So yeah, you could irrigate the Sahara. You could have more livable land on planet Earth. How is that a bad thing? I think that's a great fucking idea. You're going to, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people that are pissed off that their beachfront property is gone in Italy, right? But so what? I mean, you know, there's tons of opportunities here. And then, I mean, not even get into like the historical opportunities of what could be learned. What is in, you know, so many of these cities have yet to even like really be explored yet. You know, these archaeological finds of these ancient cities that are, you know, that fell into, or not fell in, but that were covered by the Mediterranean. Oh man, there's fascinating stuff. I mean, and just to prove the point of just how recent this was, there is a town, I think it's in Italy, or maybe it's in Greece. No, I think it's in Greece. There's a town where you can go to, you know, to the, to the edge of the Mediterranean in this town. And there's this, it's really, really weird. There is this street that runs right into the Mediterranean. Like this ancient street. And there's even like the street has kind of an indent from some kind of cart being pulled into it. So we're not talking about, you know, I mean, we're talking about that this is at a time where people were obviously doing some kind of travel or commerce or whatever, that the Mediterranean didn't cover as much land as it did. Some people want to, you know, that particular story, some people take that a little too far and they say aliens or something. And I'm not claiming anything of the sort, certainly here, which if you listen to a recent, this week's Q&A episode on Patreon, you can hear I talked aliens almost the whole episode and debunked a lot of that shit. But anyway, there's a lot of possibilities here. I think that the benefits, you know, far, far outweigh, you know, any possible negative. I don't even really see the negative. You know, I mean, what, the fishing's going to be bad? I mean, no. You know, I don't think, you don't have to drain the whole goddamn thing. Okay. You know, just get it back to, I mean, and I wonder, like, at what point could you see while you're doing this, like, could you see where perhaps it originally was? I mean, I'm sure with a, you know, topographic map and satellite, you could already see perhaps where the Mediterranean originally kind of, you know, where its original shore was. But there's a whole ton of possibilities with this. And I think it's possible to do. And it's right. Would that create jobs? Fuck yeah. There'd be a whole economy built around how do we drain this goddamn thing? Or building that dam and going to hydroelectric? Fuck yes. You know, I talked about it recently, like when I was on the crypto show, and I talked about it before, where there's a little town in upstate New York that, well, it's like a kind of a tri-town little area, but it's in the Mohawk Valley in upstate New York, where they have, there's a falls there. In fact, there's a town even called Little Falls because there's just tons of, and there's Trenton Falls. It's a makeup of the area. Okay. And they have a hydroelectric plant there that only that tri-town area gets access to and gets to use. And they have their own independent, electric company, or at least they did. Maybe it's true that it's not still there. I don't know. But up until just a few years ago, it still was. And your electric bill with this independent, you know, power company, and because it's hydroelectric, was insanely cheap. I mean, ridiculously cheap, way cheaper than anything you're ever going to get with National Grid. Hydroelectric is proven stuff. So, I mean, you get to take advantage of that as well, you know, just by setting up the dam at, you know, at the Straits of Gibraltar and wherever else. I mean, oh man, like this idea kind of excites me. And hell, maybe if you do it, whole new countries could prop up, you know, or whole new, you know, regions perhaps. Like, what's that place? Libertatia, right? I mean, that hasn't really, was it Libertatia? The one that's in that little undeclared zone in Europe? I mean, you know, these are kind of, I don't want to say public waters. They're not necessarily international waters, but these are waters where, you know, once the land kind of comes up, I mean, could people like buy this land out? And then could you create your own little freedom city or freedom country where honestly, once there were very ancient cities? Oh, that's an exciting idea. That alone almost makes it worth it. You know, granted, a person would have to have the means. Now, I don't think, honestly, part of the reason I don't think that this idea would ever take off is largely because, not because it's not a good idea or not because it's not scientifically plausible, because I think it's both. Or, you know, because I think it's the opposite of both. I think it is totally plausible to do right now. And I also think it's a good idea. But I think the reason is that honestly, like, I think you have a lot of real estate. You have, I mean, you have nation states, all of these people that would be very concerned about the instantaneous change to what they know of as their borders and their property, and their their land. What would happen to, say, I don't know, you could think of all different kinds of areas that would suddenly, like, they're tourist. That's the thing too, right? Is that a lot of tourist sections, if suddenly the Mediterranean is a few miles in now or a few miles out, a lot of towns that have built themselves around, having that ocean or that seaside view, yeah, they wouldn't be as attractive anymore, would they? But then those people, honestly, could go and work on what would really be a massive undertaking. There's no question about it. The amount of manpower and, it would take, a mini country's economy, perhaps even more than a mini country's economy, would be required to make this a reality. But I think they could do it. Like, I really think that this is totally technically feasible, especially today. We're far more, ahead of the game as far as, technology wise, obviously, than we were back when Sorgel was originally writing his works and theorizing. So I wish that something like this would take off. Again, I don't think that the ecological dangers are really there. I really don't think they are, just because it wasn't that long ago that huge chunk of the Mediterranean was land and was already, already had humans living on it and building entire fucking cities on it. And oh God, I'll admit it. That's the part that excites me the most, is the amount of things that could be found and discovered, just the history that could be gleaned from draining parts of the Mediterranean that were once inhabited by human beings, is just a phenomenal prospect, in my opinion. All the mysteries I could just imagine, maybe getting solved. Who knows? Were there other libraries like the Library of Pergamum or the Library of Alexandria, that are gone? What if there's entire libraries that, maybe the books didn't survive, but other aspects of it might have, that could give us so many great clues. Who knows? There's wild potential here. And yeah, to bring water to the desert, right? Isn't that one of the age-old dreams? You'd really be able to do that because the water's going to go somewhere. Well, there's a good place for it to go. Yeah. This could change. This could solve so many economic problems, in my opinion. That's another part of it that's really, really exciting. I wish it would happen, but it won't, because there's too many entrenched interests. And there's governments which will just say, no, illegal, right? They'll just lay down, the ban hammer on it. But it's just so tantalizing. Anyway, I'll be back with some more Sovryn tech. Maybe, who knows, in the future, maybe we could drain the Mediterranean. Woo! Talk about wild ideas. Actually, this isn't a wild idea. Earlier we were talking about Roberts Brokerage, how you could get your hands on some gold and silver with Bitcoin. But boy, if you want to keep your eye on the cryptocurrency world, like Bitcoin and others, get the best wallets, the best news, all of that, what I want you to do is go to, I love this website, and I mean it, cryptocompare.com. I cannot thank them enough for being a sponsor of Sovryn Tech. This is such a great, it's such a great resource. It's pretty much the only website I go to, when I'm looking for all of the, what's the best wallet, what's the new wallet, what's the latest price, what's topping the charts in crypto. You want to check it out, cryptocompare.com. And thank you for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Now let's get back to that Sovryn Tech. Woo! Whoa, hey, you want to slow down?
I don't do slow. I move fast.
Okay, well, so you're French.
Everyone in the future speaks French.
Wait. The future?
From 2099. Permanent Autonomous Zone, Osiris-1. You've been there.
Oh, this isn't happening. It only thinks it's happening. How do I know you're from Osiris-1?
RGP fingerprint Omega 746566666.
Okay, you're legit. Hey, really, be careful. You drive like you're playing a video game.
That is how you programmed me. Game talk.
It is time for Game Talk, where we talk video games, baby. Woo! And wow, was it a hell of a week for some Game Talk. I mean, because finally we've been talking about this, or everybody's been talking about this for, honestly, like I want to say it's been a couple of years that everybody's like, all right, what is the next Nintendo system? It's going to be the Nintendo NX. What is this baby going to be about? There's been a lot of theories banted about. Is it going to run Android? Is this thing some kind of hybrid handheld, as well as being a home console for the living room? Blah blah blah. You're like, what is the Nintendo NX? And we've been theorizing for quite a while. Was it going to have cartridges? That was one of the theories. Is that it was going to go back to using cartridges again? Instead of optical media or even downloads. All of this stuff, there was all up in the air. And finally, I think it was Thursday morning, very early in the morning, that Nintendo did a 3-minute reveal trailer of what the Nintendo NX was. And we're going to talk about it here because I think, this is my opinion on it, I think that Nintendo, once again, wiped the floor with the rest of the gaming industry, except for the PC gamers, of course. But as far as like Microsoft and Sony, they got nothing when it comes to this. Like, this was such an innovative idea. Now, what it's called, it's not the Nintendo NX, even though I really wish they would have stuck with that, but it's called the Nintendo Switch. Now, to talk about that, the code name thing, it's actually kind of disappointing. Like, I really sort of wish Nintendo has had so many great code names in the past. Like the GameCube was called the Dolphin, or even the N64 was originally called the Ultra 64, which I think having the name Ultra would have really stuck, even though N64 rolls off the tongue nicely, or Nintendo 64 is, I get it. But they've had awesome code names. Like, I think the Nintendo Dolphin would have been great, which of course now there's the emulator for the GameCube and the Wii that calls itself Dolphin, but that's where that name came from. Then there was, when the Wii was coming out, they were calling it the Revolution, right? It was called Nintendo Revolution. And not to say that the Wii wasn't a revolution. It sure as hell was. It's still, I think, the best-selling game system to date. Though, there's the chance, even in our mobile-first world, there's the chance that the Nintendo Switch might end up becoming that. But honestly, I wish they would have stuck with the NX. Don't even call it the Nintendo NX. Just call it the NX. And the X kind of makes sense here because that sort of reminds me, I don't know, it seems to fit with the word Switch, I think. So anyway, calling it the Nintendo Switch, there is a bit of brilliance to that. Okay, like they could have gone with worse names, certainly. And I think part of the brilliance with calling it the Nintendo Switch, honestly, comes down to the fact that you are creating, in that name, I think you are creating a verb. Like you are creating, it's an action. It's something that you do, which is very important. PlayStation, yeah, it says, okay, well, this is where you play, right? Xbox, kind of a failure there because it doesn't really say what you do. It says experimental, maybe, and new and exciting, but it doesn't really tell you what you're doing. But Nintendo Switch, I think, is really important because what I venture is going to happen here, and maybe it won't, but I can imagine that this is going to sell gangbusters. And we'll talk more about what it is in just a second. But I think people will be making the switch to Nintendo. Like, this is going to create a whole new generation of Nintendo fanboys, much like myself. Not that I'm a new generation. I've been a Nintendo fanboy my whole life, still am. So I think the name is really, really clever. And I wish they stuck with NX, but I get it. And calling it the Switch, it says so much about what you can do because this ended up being, yes, it is that hybrid system to where it can connect to your television or you can pull it right off from this little dock and it becomes a fully mobile platform. Okay, it's like a tablet. In fact, it looks a lot like some of the ideas that I remember like Razer had, where they created handheld, PC gaming machines, gaming rigs, where literally it was handheld. It was, there's like two sticks on each side, two joysticks like an Xbox One controller, and then in the center was the screen. It's very much copying that idea, though I'm sure it's not really a copy. I imagine Nintendo had this idea for some time. And, in reality, like what we have here is, well, how to put this, to compare it to the Wii U. I guess really, I see this as in many ways the Wii U in reverse. Like, this is kind of the direction I think that they were trying, maybe they were trying to lead everybody to. Maybe it's not so much the Wii U in reverse. What I mean by that is because this is, I don't know if you could say this is mobile first, that this device is. And by the way, there's a link in the show notes for episode 198 to a story that covers everything that we could possibly know based upon that trailer, as well as some of the things that Nintendo has said outside of it. So, yeah, like with the Wii U, you had the touchpad controller, right? Which you could like transfer the game from the TV to that. A part of me kind of wonders, I mean, I don't know. This might sound a little fanboyish or, maybe too outlandish, but I sort of wonder if Nintendo knew that this is the direction they wanted to go, was with the Nintendo Switch, to where it's kind of this mobile, potentially fully mobile platform. And they created the Wii U as an in-between device. And they sold it off as an in-between device to really get you used to the idea of, this is a direction that we're going, get used to touch controls, blah, blah, blah. Which, by the way, that's one of the things I think we don't know about the Nintendo Switch right now. And it didn't seem to get shown off in the trailer at all, or in the reveal trailer, is whether or not this thing actually has a touch screen. We don't know that, as to where the Wii U controller certainly did have one. Which, by the way, Nintendo has made it very clear there won't be any, no conversation about what the actual specs are for this thing until 2017. So this trailer right now is pretty much all we got. I guess to describe it quickly, over audio, or you can just go to the link in the show notes and you can actually watch the trailer yourself. But it looks very much like that Wii U controller. It looks very much like a tablet with two control pads on its side. And it can sit into a dock that is connected to your television or whatever. And this dock, and on the sides, I guess I should say, on the sides of the screen that make up the Nintendo Switch, you can pull off the controllers from that, which is kind of cool because it allows for, the way that they're just sitting in it. They kind of look like dog ears, but the way that they're just sitting in it, you can use it to control, just holding it like you would a tablet, but instead of having touchscreen controls, you have physical buttons, which is a great thing. I've complained about that forever on Sovryn Tech, that one of the big problems with mobile gaming is the lack of hardware buttons. Touchscreens just don't cut it. They don't do it. They can't. I don't care how much you do Force Touch or 3D Touch or whatever. It just doesn't work. You got to have those physical buttons when when you're gaming. So you have that. But what's interesting is, like I said, those can slide off, those controllers, and they can make up two controllers, so you can do multiplayer at any given time. So there's local multiplayer. It's great to reinforce that. I'm getting all over the place here with talking about it. But anyway, describing it, you put it into this dock, and then there seems to be like a Pro controller, that's available, kind of like how the Wii and the Wii U have a multitude of controllers that it can accept. There's at least two USB ports on the dock itself, which I think that'll end up being very important, as far as what will be, what can connect to that, through the USB. In fact, really, so far of what I've seen of this, I really feel like this is the culmination of largely every technology that Nintendo has ever innovated or developed. This is in many ways the ultimate Nintendo machine, in my opinion. And partly because, yes, it is that hybrid of home console and handheld, which Nintendo, does gangbusters on handhelds. Keep this in mind. The 3DS, which we don't know that this is necessarily a replacement for the 3DS. The 3DS has, I think there's more 3DSs in the wild than there are Xbox Ones and PlayStation 4s put together. That's how popular the 3DS is. There's tons of them. It does very, very well. So Nintendo really, really still wins when it comes to mobile. And I don't think the Nintendo Switch will be any different on that end. But connecting it, the one technology that's up and coming and that Nintendo has dallianced with in the past, including in a mobile fashion, though I don't think it'll necessarily be mobile this time around. What I really think those USB ports are going to get used for is virtual reality. I think down the line, Nintendo will release some kind of virtual reality upgrade or whatever to the Nintendo Switch that you can just plug in, but it'll have to be plugged in at home. Because that's the other thing. We don't know battery life. There's so many, and there's tons of batteries. This is a fucking battery operated system. Okay. You have those little controllers that come off the side of it. Those are obviously, have their own little batteries. The whole device has its own little battery. Of course, when it's docked, it's plugged in, but Or, you know, actually, that's a good question. I wonder if you can play it not plugged in, but in the dock. I wonder how that would work out. But those are things we don't know. You know, we don't have any clue on all of that. But I think that there will be virtual reality involved because you have, you know, PlayStation VR is out there now. The reviews are very interesting. You have probably, you know, Project Scorpio, which will be coming out. You know, that's the new Xbox for 2017. That will likely have some form of VR, you know, as to who they're going to go with, who knows. But I mean, again, I think Project Scorpio is just going to end up being a Windows 10 PC, you know, that Microsoft's going to, you know, gaming PC that Microsoft is going to build themselves, which isn't a bad idea at all. But anyway, I think that Nintendo, that those USB ports being on there are going to be key to a lot of that, to doing that. And yeah, so, you know, as far as like what hardware we do know about it, like I said, I know I'm going all over the place, but I think this is such an interesting topic. This is real innovation, folks. Like if you watch the trailer, and I recommend you do, I wish I could show it to you over audio, but it's not possible, of course. But like this is a genuinely innovative product. It's insane, you know, and it's so funny because like everybody's looking, oh, what's Silicon Valley? Oh, we're innovating. Oh, in Boston, we're innovating. Oh, you know, whatever city. Man, Nintendo just schooled everybody, you know, and came up with something genuinely, I think genuinely really new. Even if it follows, you know, certain aspects of design language from other things, but it's genuinely very new. So why don't I rein it in? And I want to let's talk about just like a couple of hardware things, and then of course we need. I mean, maybe the most important aspect of any gaming console is what? The games. What games do we know about? And there's a few that we know about. So as far as the hardware goes, you know, beyond everything else, the USB ports, how this thing connects and everything. I mean, oh, and it does have a kickstand too. I thought that was cool. It has a little stand so that you can set it down. And in the trailer, they're showing people I mean, the trailer was really cheesy, but it did its job of showing off what this thing can do. Or at least a lot of what it can do, what we're expecting. So you could set it down in the trailer like they show off, and like everybody's just kind of like standing around, you know, a bunch of hipsters and everything, and they're playing this game. Or they have two Nintendo Switches, and somehow they're connected, probably Bluetooth or whatever, some version of Street Pass, who knows, from Nintendo, that would allows them to connect. And then you have like a, you know, four-person multiplayer, all this beautiful local multiplayer, which I love seeing come back to fore, which that's really, you know, again, talk about culmination of technologies. You know, that was one of the big things from the Nintendo 64 was that, you know, in the 90s, everybody could come over and play. I mean, GoldenEye, you know, did so much money for Nintendo. Everybody remembers that game. So anyway, now what's at the heart of this thing? So like I said, we don't know a whole lot of the technical, specifications of what's inside the NX, but there is one we have somewhat of an idea of. And that is, it is powered by an NVIDIA Tegra chip. Now, this opens up a lot of possibilities. Okay, this is important to talk about. As far as what Tegra chip, we don't know. In fact, they said it's a custom Tegra chip. Not an unheard of thing. The Microsoft Surface Book, ironically another company in Redmond, because Nintendo of America is in Redmond as well. The Surface Book has a custom NVIDIA chip. So now the Nintendo Switch does as well, but if it's based off of, I mean, you got to figure there's some model that it's initially based off of. Now you have the Tegra X1, which is an insanely powerful chip, but admittedly, it's about, I'll say like it's about 40% as powerful as the Xbox One or the PS4. But then there's the Tegra X2, and the X2 is about 80% as powerful as a PS4 or an Xbox One. I think that's good enough. So if it's based off of the X2, that's a very interesting prospect. Now, what other questions does this raise? You know, being based off of a very solid, chipset, I should say. Well, what's interesting about it is that maybe this thing really is running Android. For once, you know, like, I mean, or not for once, but that was sort of, you know, that was one of the rumors is that it would run on Android. Well, it having a Tegra processor definitely leans in that direction. So this being a mobile first device and effectively a tablet, this is really a tablet, that just has a really nice dock. That's probably the best way to describe this thing. Okay. But to have this tablet, I mean, if this is just an Android tablet with a whole bunch of, Nintendo goodness baked in, can it run Pokemon Go? Can it run, could it run Miitomo and some of the other games coming out from Nintendo's partnership with DENA? Yeah, maybe. I hope. I mean, that just makes fucking sense, to do that. And I mean, but that's the thing. We don't know if it has GPS. We don't know everything that's in it. All, it's a big push though, is that you can play anything, anywhere. And another aspect of that, of course, is, and this starts on the gaming conversation, is it does have a physical, cartridge slot. So they are going back to using flash memory, which they never really left. The 3DS still has flash memory and all this. Granted, you can also download games as well. It's, we don't know if you're going to be able to, I would assume you're going to be able to download games onto this, but will you be able to download the big titles? I don't know, because, we're talking about the difference here from the 3DS is that we really are talking about console class gaming. Like one of the big games to come out is the new Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which that's going to be great to be able to play that mobily. That's exciting as shit to me. I can't, by the way, this is coming out March 2017. I am so fucking excited for this. I cannot wait. All right. But, you're going to have Breath of the Wild, which is this giant, open sandbox game, for Zelda that looks absolutely stunning. Graphically, it looks beautiful. I don't know if you're going to be able to fit a bunch of, a bunch of console class, home console class games onto one of these devices. Like, unless there's like a 1 terabyte hard drive inside of the Nintendo Switch, which I kind of have a hard time believing. That it really doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to sell the cartridges and, have those, because flash memory is so cheap, and have the cartridges be, whatever, 64 gig cartridges or something like that can, or even 32 gig is good enough to easily store modern games, modern home class games, onto it. So it's a good direction to go. And this is another area where they're just going to wipe everybody, because if they don't go with the download aspect of it, like, this is really cool, because one of the big problems, for me, that I hate about modern consoles is, as soon as even if you buy the game physically, you have to download like an entire 4 gig pack to update the game and all this. Like that, that's goddamn annoying. So to be able to circumvent all of that, in fact, I even wonder, honestly, and this could be a security concern, but as long as they keep it kind of limited, perhaps, as to what it can do, what the Nintendo Switch can do. If you could do read-write, maybe you could even write the updates onto the cartridges themselves. And so you could have an offline copy, fully updated, of the game that you could transfer, say, to your new NX or something, without having to download the new patch. Like, so you could do read-write of the flash memory onto that cartridge. There's problems with that, but I think that could be a very interesting model. So, and you're getting rid of those load times. This is a winning idea, going with cartridges on a home console, in my opinion. Love it. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of download games. I'm sure there's going to be a virtual console, which has been a part of, the past 2 Nintendo systems as well, or, every Nintendo system in the past decade. Really, really cool. Now, what games are you going to be able to get, aside from, obviously having access to the virtual console where you could buy another copy of Super Mario Brothers and whatever else? That is the first one that we know about, is that they did show off some new 3D Mario game. So we're going to get that. We already mentioned Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. That's going to be coming. Then there's, like almost every major game publishing house has pretty much already signed on with it. They had the list, and they're all there. So potentially there's a lot of great games to come for this. It's kind of sad. I was really hoping to see, like, this would have been really nice to show off, like a Metroid game, maybe another Metroid Prime game, which a lot of people have wanted, a little FPS action. That would be really cool. There's going to be some ports of games from the Wii U. Like Mario Kart 8 will be on there, and I think some others are going to be getting ported over to to the NX. Not that that's not anything necessarily new. Like when the GameCube and the Wii, like remember Twilight Princess, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess came out for the GameCube as well as the Wii, those many years ago. So that's not that outlandish, but also I think that points to my point that the Wii U might have just been an in-betweener. Like, it was something to, the Wii was getting long in the tooth, and it was really, it's funny because maybe Nintendo was just way ahead of, no pun intended, way ahead of the game of everybody else, because now what's happening is you have PlayStation where they have their middle of the road PS4 coming out now, right? Where it's a slight upgrade that can do 4K and all that. And you have you have Xbox where you have the Project Scorpio and the Xbox One S and all that coming out, midway, and that you're not getting like this totally new system. Like normally a generation goes about 6 to 8 years, and generally we never had like these mid-system upgrades like this. I mean, you'd have like a slim model would get sold, but not like where some fundamentals would be changed. But maybe that's what Nintendo was thinking, is that's why they called it the Wii U, because it was just this it was kind of this midpoint of an upgrade to what was really going to be their next great system, which they've had in mind for a while. I could believe that the Nintendo would be thinking that way. And Nintendo's already they already did it too, sort of with the new 3DS, where, it is actually like a more powerful system, even though they would have done well to kind of brand it a little bit better than just calling it the new 3DS. But anyway, so, porting some of the great Wii U titles to the NX, or, to the Switch. It's going to take me a while to get used to calling it the Nintendo Switch. But I think that's a great idea. Why not? Because the Wii U didn't really sell well. So there's probably a ton of great, and there are a ton of great games on the Wii U that nobody's played, that if you could sell it for the Nintendo Switch, people are going to jump on board with. And again, I don't think that this thing needs to be a graphical powerhouse. Because some people say, well, isn't it going to have the previous generation's graphics? Yeah, but I don't think that matters. I think a lot of what Nintendo does that makes it great, it doesn't rely on graphical prowess. I mean, you're going to have your Legend of, you're going to have, a Breath of the Wild, which is going to be, which is already stunning. So you've got it there. But for a lot of those things like Mario Kart 8, I mean, I'm sure, probably when they re-release it for the NX, they're going to do something about, frame rate and perhaps, and graphical improvements and all that. But you don't really need it for what Nintendo does, in my opinion. And yeah, I see this really taking off, bringing back local multiplayer, making it a game system that can be played anywhere, anytime. I mean, everybody's talking about the fact, this is what's funny, because there's a lot of people that are kind of knocking that this isn't a home console, that it's mobile. Well, but then you have everybody in the world fucking saying, oh, mobile gaming's where it's at. It's where it's at. It's where it's at. But then when Nintendo gets into mobile gaming, they're like, oh, no, we don't mean that. I mean, that doesn't even make sense, especially if this thing runs Android. So I don't know. People are just full of shit. Like that's the bottom line, as far as that goes. But I think that this is a totally innovative product. I think that there's a ton of great ideas that we don't even know about yet that they have in mind for this. They even, like, in the trailer, they show a guy playing it on the airplane, which is interesting because this is a tablet, so it's not something you'd have to store under the seat. And also I like the fact that that's really kind of hinting at, this can work offline. That's sort of an unconscious message that gets sent in this trailer, is that this baby can work wherever, whenever. And that's so key, because I hate the fact that, and since it's cartridge based, certainly you could. I hate the fact that, like, every modern console, oh, you got to have an internet connection. You got to have an internet connection. Annoying as shit. And so maybe the NX, will stand in contrast to that. Another thing quickly that was shown in the trailer was there was an emphasis on esports. I hope that becomes a thing. I really, really hope that becomes a thing with the Nintendo Switch. Like they're showing some kind of like major Splatoon tournament or something. Yeah, let's let that happen, and Nintendo, fund the shit out of it yourselves, because I think that's an exciting direction to go. And hey, Nintendo Switch, look, I love it. I can't wait.
Tonight, Knight Rider crashes into your living room.
I don't believe this.
Well, you'd better believe it. A lone crusader for justice drives this crime crasher.
The world's most fantastic car.
And together they can do just about anything.
After all, we're only human.
Don't press your luck.
And now, buckle up for action with the fastest show on television, Knight Rider.
See Knight Rider online today. And now back to Sovryn Tech.
Pixel says it should be this panel.
We need to hack into the control center to shut down all of those assassin bots.
Well, you're the android. Can't you just jack in?
Oui, but The way I connect is more like a jack off.
Was that a joke?
Hacking is no joke.
Directly connecting certainly beats doing it with the keyboard.
You're notorious for your love of cyber sex.
Okay, now that was a joke. Just get hacking.
A quick hack solves everything. Hacksack.
It is time for HackSec, where we talk issues of hacking and security and privacy, really. And I've got a great story here, actually very interesting, technology that's getting, or, idea that's getting pushed out there that I hope takes off. But before I do, I just realized there was a point I wanted to mention earlier when talking about Tesla, and that is that Bloomberg came out with a story that brought more proof to the fact that Apple has really gotten out of the car business. Now, I said that I always felt that the car business, because the idea was that by the 2020 or something, Apple would be making an Apple car. And maybe they'll still surprise us. I don't know. But, I had said that I thought really, those rumors about them building a car were just to put some spice in the stale news cycle around Apple, which has been very stale. Even though there's an Apple event where supposedly they're going to have MacBooks with a second screen and all this stuff getting released next week. Microsoft has a hardware event next week too. But Bloomberg pretty much has said, no, look, they're done. They're not going to build their own car anymore. And I wanted to bring that up earlier because it corroborates the point I was making that, people are just not going to own cars. Now, I'm not saying that you have to own a car or something like this. I'm saying that, again, my point is that for all of these technologies to work, including the ones that Apple's probably still working on, okay, with driverless cars and all that, nobody can have a car with a steering wheel. That's the main problem here. But I think that I think this is also Apple realizing, even if they ever were serious about a car, is they realize nobody's going to own these cars. So, and they make all of their money off of selling products that you actually own, right? An iPhone, MacBook, whatever. Okay. So it's really it's kind of against their business model that they're used to doing with their hardware. So whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to toss it out there. I put the link in the show notes. It is still there for you to check out. Now, let's get into our main story for HackSec. This is from Fortune, of all places. This badge blurs your face in all those questionable social media photos. Now, this is a nice takeoff point from 2 episodes ago. The past couple episodes I've had guests on, but from the episode previous to that, which would have been 195 of Sovryn Tech, where we talked about, hey, this whole photo culture thing, what can we do about this? Well, here's a potential solution. And it is the Do Not Snap device. If you're constantly reading the story here, if you're constantly removing tags from unflattering photos your friends post to social media, one company is about to make your life a whole lot easier. AVG Innovation Labs has created the, quote, Do Not Snap badge, end quote, a sort of pin that's linked to software designed to automatically blur the wearer's face in photos when they are posted online. The device works via an algorithm that is able to recognize the Do Not Snap logo, according to the company's blog. And regardless of what platform the photo is posted on, the wearer's face will still be blurred. Quote, the philosophy behind Do Not Snap is that Snapchat, or any social media, should automatically recognize when a user doesn't want their image shared and take action on it, end quote, the company wrote. Quote, this is a realistic ambition as we demonstrated in a prototype earlier this year. And there's a little video on the website that shows you kind of how it all works. What it looks like is this little yellow badge. Okay. And I mean, it could be a sticker. I mean, there's a bunch of ways you could be on a pin, and it just has like what is effectively like a fancy QR code on it that something will recognize, and it'll automatically make it blur. Let's read on more of the story here. That said, social media networks and online platforms aren't obligated to integrate the badge recognition software. Popular apps like Snapchat and Facebook don't currently have any plans to use it either, according to Business Insider. But AVG Innovation Labs has open sourced the technology, good for you, to encourage its adoption, and people who wish to use Do Not Snap's code can download it today. Quote, we're trying to spark conversation and contribute something meaningful, end quote. Maurice McGinley, design director at AVG Innovation Labs, first told Business Insider. Quote, I think people aren't aware of the need, and they aren't aware of the threat. Ooh, right on. until privacy's gone. So the first step is always to raise awareness, end quote. People aren't aware of the threat. I love that line, Stallion breaking in, because I mean, this is my point a lot of times, is that people say, well, look, I don't care if I just get better ads, blah, blah, blah. But like they don't think about the fact that because it's, you know, it's something, it's digital, you know, something online, they don't really grasp, they don't really like consider just the long play on this, that maybe all of this data in the, you know, in a few years could actually end up being very detrimental. Kind of like the case I always bring up where, you know, college kids started using Facebook in 2007, and, you know, they thought it was only for college, but then come 2010, you know, or well, even before that, it starts being available to everybody. And then employers start looking at it and they see all your drunk photos and they're like, oh, fuck you, we're not hiring you. So point being, I'm glad everybody thinks it's all fine and dandy right now, but you don't know that it's going to be fine and dandy in the near future. But this is a great idea. Now, granted, I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of, I don't know, I can imagine some kind of system that would be given to the government so that they could, you know, unblur the photos or something like that. I mean, or if anything, you know, it's going to get stored. Well, actually, no, I guess that's not how that would work, but I'm sure they'd find some way to get past the blurring. But overall, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great direction. I think it's in many ways a great educational tool for people to see, you know, to take a picture and then suddenly they realize, holy shit, why are all these people's faces blurred? Like, say if they took a shot, you know, in some like town square or something and people were wearing this. But then that's the question, is how easily would it recognize it? Like if you're taking a really broad shot, you know, how well does the QR code work? I mean, it's kind of, it's a concept. I really think that this is sort of a proof of concept more than anything, but it's a proof of concept really in the right direction. I love the idea that you could just wear this little badge, and if you're wearing it, you know, or it's a little sticker or piece of, you know, Velcro or something that you could take off. And if you're wearing it, you know, everything just goes blurry. I mean, this can be done, you know, on device side as well, but of course you, the person getting the picture taken of you, doesn't necessarily have the control at that point. But you have, what is it, Obscuracam from the Guardian Project, where you can blur stuff. It'll take a picture kind of in a temp format, and then you could blur out the picture, you know, after the fact if somebody doesn't want their face to be in it, something like that, you know, before it even really like gets stored hard into the, you know, into the phone's memory. I mean, like that's an interesting idea too, but I love this. I really think this is the way, you know, this kind of stuff getting developed is the way to go. And I'm glad they understand that, look, people don't realize right now, and we don't know what this lack of privacy, how it could affect you in the future. So, you know, I mean, I'd put one of these all, you know, I'd cover myself in this. I mean, it's a clever idea, you know, to do this through, you know, through a simple QR code. And just to kind of, again, just to send that message overall. I think that would maybe people would start realizing, oh, hey, this person doesn't want their picture taken. Why don't they want their picture taken? You know, in all of this. So great technology, great idea, has its flaws, but, you know, obviously, but a great proof of concept. And I think the social media network that takes advantage of this first, they might have a winner on their hands. Hell, this is a way for a social media network, maybe like Twitter, to get into the retail business, because they could sell this stuff.
The reviews are in, and Babylon 5's a winner. The New York Daily News says Babylon 5 could make Star Wars look like a walk in the park. The Chicago Sun-Times calls it a welcome addition to the sci-fi universe. Impressive, perfectly scaled for TV, raves the LA Times. And the Kansas City Star says Babylon 5 is one space station you're likely to want to visit frequently. See for yourself what everyone's talking about on Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
Adelaide, why are we stopping?
In the future, we have a custom.
What's the custom?
After a successful mission, a team usually has love, a ménage à trois, or orgy.
Yeah, there's only two of us.
I already contacted the others to come join us. I love women too.
Whoa, Adelaide, you're beautiful, but you're an android.
I am fully functional. I am programmed in multiple techniques, a broad variety of
Wow, I guess so. You did say you move fast. Adelaide. The future is going to be so good.
the climax.
Woo-hoo. It is time for the climax, and do I get to talk about something this week? Of course, the climax is where I can talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. Could be a movie, TV show, book, comic book, topic, whatever. I can talk about anything. But I get to talk about something, which is what I always like to talk about, something sexy this week. And so anyway, before I get into it, I want to start off. A lot of people have already emailed me and said, hey, are you watching Westworld? Yes, I am watching Westworld on HBO. It would be unfair to do a review, only like 3 or 4 episodes in. It'd be really unfair. So, but I'll tell you right out of the gate, like I'm a little disappointed. Now, I mean, Westworld, look up the plot if you don't know. I waste too much time like telling people, what everything's about and all that. And anyway, I'm a little disappointed in Westworld because I feel like the direction it's going, no spoilers here really, but the direction that it's going seems kind of tried and true, like in a way that's like cliche to where, it's about robots that are, being mistreated. I'm a little, I mean, I get it. And that's a real concern, but I don't know. It looks like I'm not that impressed. And also the other thing out of the gate, like I said, I will review it in coming weeks. Maybe when something more interesting happens, because it's very slow paced. Not that that's a problem. You can be slow paced. That's okay. But there was, it was kind of getting, it was getting a lot of hype around it for some time because they were talking about how, the agreements, the contract agreements or the contracts that a lot of the actors had to sign to where, look, you could be in some very depraved sexual situations and all this stuff. You need to be okay with that. You can't sue us for having to be in it. Understand that you're going to have to do this perhaps at any given moment, blah, blah, blah. And there's been maybe one quasi orgy scene, which wasn't even that great. I don't know. I was expecting a ton of sex in this show, and it really has not delivered on that at all. To some degree, that's part of the hype. It's not like, if I didn't know that there was all about all these, contracts that these actors had to sign, I probably wouldn't have been expecting it. I wouldn't have given a shit, and I just kind of watch it. But right now it feels kind of disappointing. Not to say it's been bad. The acting is great, production's great, all that, is really something, but it's not shaping up to be exactly what I think was being billed. And there might be I wonder what the reason being is, because they were developing this for years. Maybe that development hell, there was a good reason for it because, I don't know, maybe it's just not that exciting of a deal. But anyway, I don't mean to pass judgment so early. I'm not going to. There's a chance that in the next few episodes, it could become an amazing show. And they've already said they have like a 5-6 year plan. We'll see how all that shapes up. So anyway, so I'm in it for the long haul. I'm just saying so far, it's not living up to what was being said previously. It's not living up to any of the hype. Could anything live up to that hype? Yes, because some of it wasn't hype. It was just like facts about what the show was supposed to have, and none of it's there yet. Anyway, so Westworld, I'll reserve judgment for the moment, but I'm just saying right now, it's not terrible, but I'm not super impressed like I was, say, with Spartacus or something else, where I was like, oh, fuck, this is, two rough opening episodes, but once it got to episode 3, woo, it was on. Though I didn't mind the first 2 episodes either. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that here. What I want to talk about something that is genuinely sexy, and somewhat intentionally, I think, because they recognized what I've said many, many a time on Sovryn Tech, is a very intentionally, or is very consciously and unconsciously very sexy show. That is what I want to talk about, is the animated movie that came out just on October 11th, Batman Return of the Caped Crusaders. And this is a movie that is a sequel to the 1966 Batman series, which is my favorite Batman. like my favorite, like Batman style. And also I think Adam West is smooth as hell. Now, this animated movie made by DC, of course, it had Adam West doing the voice of Batman. It had Burt Ward doing the voice of Robin. It even had Julie Newmar, doing the voice of Catwoman again. Of course, she played Catwoman originally, and all those actors played, the respective parts. And while granted, Burt Ward sounded great. Like, he just sounds forever young, I think. But while granted, Adam West sounded a little slow and kind of old, and I mean that with all respect. And Julie Newmar, didn't sound as perfectly wonderful, maybe as she once did. They both did great. I still thought it was fantastic. And there were so many adult jokes. Like, this was definitely not made for kids. But as I've said forever, I don't think the 66 Batman was really made for kids either. Maybe it got sold to kids. But that show has so much innuendo, so much sexual innuendo, and just has like such a sexy style and all this other stuff. I mean, like, there's a reason that show's so timeless. Not because it's great for kids, but because everybody kind of recognizes at whatever stage of personal development they're in, they recognize, oh man, there's brilliance here, or there's something I could really like here. And there was, in Return of the Caped Crusader, the animation style was just fine. It was really good. It wasn't really hokey at all. I'll give you some spoiler alert. I'll put that up right now, but that's all you're getting. You finally get the Bat Rocket. Like, this movie goes into space, and it's only like an hour and 20. I don't even think it was an hour and 20. But it had so many cool aspects to it. I really, really loved it. And I mean, even where Batman kind of starts to go bad in it, and he does, and it's hilarious. And what's really great is that finally now, like, you can get Adam West saying some of the classic Batman lines, because when he starts to go bad, he starts to get really mean, and he starts to play up more like a Frank Miller style Batman, right? And not that he's bad through the whole thing. For most of it, he's the hero, but it becomes a plot point. But there's the point where, like, he does the line from Dark Knight Returns where he says, it's like this isn't a space station, this is an operating table, and I'm the surgeon. And to have Adam West being able to say that, oh, that was so worth it. It was so good. And some other great lines that he quotes from, other renditions of Batman, I thought were really cool. But yeah, lots of adult jokes, a lot of very interesting. One of the best jokes I thought actually ripped on the police really well, because there's a point where they're about to cross the street and Batman stops Robin and says, "Robin, you're jaywalking." And it's like, oh, and Robin says, "Gosh, you're right, Batman. It's important to follow the law even when you're out there trying to enforce it." And like, I thought that was such a dig at the cops, because that's the problem. Or, the police's own existence is the problem, but like, as an institution. But, one of the problems within that institution itself is that it doesn't follow the laws that it's trying to, quote unquote, trying to enforce, if that's even the goal. But I thought that was just such a nice jab. And there was, the way they played off Catwoman was really sexy. And in fact, I even loved the point where there was a point where, like, Batman is kind of hazy and he ends up seeing like 3 Batwomen. Now there's really only one, but he ends up seeing 3, and the other Batwomen are the ones that also played Catwoman. It's early, folks. Plays Catwoman. Like, there was the black Catwoman, and there was another actress, and he ends up like seeing them, so they got included. Like, everything. It was such a great kind of not remix, but mishmash of all the different aspects. Everything that they could put into from Batman 66 into one little movie. They even had, Professor Egg was in it. All the villains at one point are in it. It was so well done. Man, and the people they got to voice a lot of the villains did a great job of mimicking the classic villains, I thought. And there, again, just like with the 66 show, there was a lot of sexual innuendo. The one thing that wasn't in there, and I'm sure this will get rectified because there's going to be a sequel, the one thing that wasn't in there was Batgirl. And I was a little shocked. I was a little surprised at that. I didn't see any reason to not have her in it. but she'll probably be in the next movie. Now, they are coming out with a sequel, and this Return of the Caped Crusaders is being widely met with rave reviews. And I'm so happy for that, because I grew up, or, as a teenager and even as a young adult, hearing that, the Batman 66 is terrible. Now, that's not true anymore, because the comic book series that's been running for a couple of years now does gangbusters, and I'm so excited that that's true. And so what I'm kind of hoping here, because this did so well, they are making a sequel. What I want out of the sequel, one of the things I think is already great. Two-Face is going to be in it. He's going to be the main villain. We already know that. And that's great, because Two-Face has never been in the Batman 66 canon, really. Or, I mean, at least it wasn't in the show. Like, even though he's such a popular, Batman villain. And William Shatner is voicing Two-Face. That is so great. Win all the way. I read that and I was like, oh, thank you. Finally, William Shatner gets to be a part of my other favorite franchise. Now, if only we could get him in Star Wars somehow. But anyway, George Takei's been in Star Wars, but, all right. So he's going to play Two-Face. I'm really hoping that Batgirl is in it. I think that would be phenomenal. And then the other thing I'm actually hoping that happens, or maybe this will be in the third movie, and hopefully DC's playing their cards right, and they are making a kind of a trilogy here. Because either I want this in the second movie or I want it in the third. But, Julie Newmar, Burt Ward's, I think, decently young, so you could count on him. But Adam West is getting up there in age. I wouldn't want anybody to die before they get to do all these stories, before they can maybe finish out a trilogy. So I'm concerned about that. Okay. And I mean, William Shatner is very old too, so I'm glad they're getting him in, even though the guy seems to be on the Fountain of Youth, just like Patrick Stewart. But what I really want to see, so second one, got to have Batgirl in it. But either in the second one or in the third one, let's bring on the 77 Wonder Woman. In fact, they're doing a comic book series that they're releasing in January, which will be a crossover between Batman 66 and Wonder Woman 77. That is super exciting to me for a bunch of reasons. One is that while there have always been crossovers of Batman 66, or of Batman and Wonder Woman, I should say, just in the abstract, there was never that great crossover that I think everybody was expecting, because the shows are both a product of their time. There was never that great crossover between Batman 66 and Wonder Woman 77. And that'd be okay it would actually make sense, because again, Adam West is getting old. So have him, have that older voice kind of a Batman 66 version of Dark Knight Returns that takes place in 1977. I think that would be really cool. So I'm hoping that either that's in the second movie, or that if there's a third movie, if we get a trilogy, the third movie can be that great crossover between, the Adam West Batman and the Linda Carter Wonder Woman. And get Linda Carter to voice. Bring her in. She's great. I think it would be awesome. I think it would sell like no tomorrow, especially when you have the Wonder Woman movie with Gal Gadot coming out, next summer? So keep the Wonder Woman hype coming, and hype it up with this crossover movie that could happen. So anyway, enough of that. If you haven't watched Return of the Caped Crusaders, trust me, even if you don't know a lot about Batman, it is so funny. It is a ton of fun. It is sexy. Believe me, for an animated thing, it's like there's some great lines in it. I mean, they did this right. I couldn't. And I remember saying, I was like, oh yeah, it's movie night with Adam West, Burt Ward, and Julie Newmar. I was like, I never thought I'd be able to say those words again anyway. And I did, and I thought that was so great. Check it out if you haven't. Anyway, enough of that. Woo! That's enough Sovryn Tech for this week. We'll be back next week, baby. And if you want to help donate to the show, please, patreon.com/SovrynTech. Hit it up. Carpe Lucem. Woo! I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to SovrynnTech.com, that's SOVRYN Tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.